Good to see you taking a few, we work together there. Yeah, I will. The mayor's caucus, we'll go through all the time together. West Elming, Michael Skipper. Mayor-elect Michael Skipper, director of GNRC. Yeah. You know that when you've already met. Yeah, we got it. Very good. Thank you. But Michael won't have to do it. That's the trouble. For now. We're going to go down this here. If we can go over there. There's always I'll get them.
How are you?
My report, I thought you was going to kick her. You might hear my staff. I guess much free back here. You speak good to you. You try planning workplace, right?
Okay, I'd like to call if you can hear me, I'm going to call the August 17th Transportation Policy Board to order. First, I'd like to say to all the ones that I've been working with the last 4 years, if you're not going to be here in November, man, it's been great. It's been great working with you. I've met a lot of nice people. I mean nice people, and it's an enjoyment to me to come to Nashville and get out of the office for a while. You know, because everybody here's got the same problems I got, and we can all relate to each other. I'd like to welcome the new ones. I was thinking about Mayor Golden over there. 4 years ago, I felt like I was drinking water out of a fire hose. And now, right after re-election, it feels the same way again. I don't think it ever ends. I mean, I can't even get the signs down because of new county commissioners and all that. And of course, we're dealing with the infrastructure and the growth. So if any kind of way I can help you, I'd be glad to do it, because Jim was good to me. And I'm going to miss you, Jim. I thought I was going to miss Andy Hope, but I hear he got kicked upstairs somewhere. So we'll see him in Murfreesboro and places like that.
Really? I thought you were my friend.
We are friends. You didn't help me much, but we're friends. I said, Andy, I got a problem. He said, call me tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. I just want to say, if you're going to be abstaining or voting nay on something, please recognize yourself for the record. And since we called order, I need a motion to approve the minutes from the April meeting. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, if you want to pass those minutes, say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, in my cheat sheet here, it says we got to pass the minutes of the June 15th meeting too. I need a motion. Got a motion and a second? Got a second. All in favor say aye. Does anyone oppose? Okay, thank you, board. All right, this time we open up our public comments. Does anyone here would like to take the floor and make a comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll shut that down and we'll go to our action items. Okay, a resolution 2205 amending the 2023 TIP. I'm going to introduce Anna. You ready to take over, Anna?
I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. We only have two proposed amendments to present to you today for this cycle of TIP amendments, which will be the last for the current federal fiscal year. The first of those is a request by TDOT to add construction funding to the Hartsville Pike, which is State Route 141, widening from north of Lovers Lane to East High Street. They're requesting to add that construction funding to the TIP. It's state STBG funding. Following that is a request from Mount Juliet to add a Beckwith Road widening project. This will be from I-40 to South Rutland Road and Posey Hill Road. This is just south of I-40 in Mount Juliet. They're requesting to add the project to the TIP with all local funding so that they can get started on preliminary engineering and also pursue right-of-way. And those are all the proposed amendments that we have for you today. I did want to mention, I know that there was some discussion in our meeting together in June about an award that Sumner County received from the Governor's State Highway Partnership Program. This is for the State Route 386 project from State Route 174 to State Route 109. I know we had a request to amend that project into the TIP. Just wanted to let everyone know that we did have discussions with both TDOT and the local agencies involved, and it was determined that that project isn't quite ready to add to the TIP. There's some further discussion that needs to happen and some discussions regarding budget, local funds being contributed, possible other funds that are being contributed. I did just want to turn the floor over to TDOT, either to Matt Messervy or Brian Hurst, who are both with us today, in case they wanted to comment on this project.
The only update I have is that they're division project through the county. Hey members, my name is Brian Hurst. It's good to see some faces. It's been a while since I've been up here. I do have some information on several projects. I know y'all have three, we call them GFT projects, General Fund Transfer projects, and the one is the 386 extension. And like both said, we're very early on with it. We've had coordination with the local governments. We sent a letter back and forth. So what the department and the MPO is currently waiting on is our agreement. We want to make sure everything's in place before we start writing it up and put it into the TIP. I know a lot of y'all see a lot of the amendments and modifications that come through all the time, but we really like to limit those. And I know our FHWA partners also like to limit our amendments. So as soon as we have all the information nailed down, is when we'll actually add it to the TIP.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you, Anna, on bringing that up. I think that's important. We've all got a lot of projects. I've signed my portion of the contract, I believe. Have you received yours? Did you sign that yet, Mayor? So we're well on our way, and I look forward to meeting on Friday. This thing, we just want to make sure, and we've put our money up for the portion. I think yours is about $7.9 million. I just want to make sure that Mayor Isabel, to be here within a few days, understands what's going on, that we can help the city of Galveston, because it's a pretty big lift for them to come up with $7.9 million. And if we can get this in this TIF, then it's going to help them leverage that a little bit to make sure we come up with a local match. So I appreciate your hard work and Michael's, and just want to let everybody know, TDOT and GNRC, that this is vitally important for us, and we're extremely excited. But at the same time, we want to continue to pursue this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question, if I may. So, Matt, I don't know if it would be possible for TDOT to present an overview of these projects. I mean, these are governor's priorities. I mean, we're often in the weeds on programming, but I think the board might benefit from just understanding what the vision is for these projects, what will be accomplished over what timeline, and their significance to the state, if that would be something that we can request. So for a lot of the projects, the general fund transfers across the state, and we do have a lot of them, we're still in such early phases we don't even have a planning document. For the 386 projects, we do have a planning document, and we can get somebody to come here and present, on behalf of the board, to show what's going on. The other GFT projects, especially in y'all's area, we don't have a planning document yet. We're in the early phases trying to figure out exactly what this department's going to do. And when we work with y'all, the local governments, to figure out what exactly the process is, the typical sections out there, the type of bridge, so some of them are just bridges and interchanges, we can definitely come out here and present that also. We have no problem at all. Actually, the 386 one is online and it's shared for the public, so anytime anybody wants to see it, they can.
I'll just add that we had two other projects within the region that were awarded funding through the State Highway Partnership Program, the State Route 386 project that we're discussing now, as well as the I-40 interchange at McCrory Lane and the I-24 interchange at Buchanan Road in Rutherford County.
Yes, those two are the other two I was talking about. McCanning Road right now is going by two different names, so you may hear, I think it's Epsmill Road also, so you may hear that name thrown around there. Again, before we get into the TIP, we'll make sure we have that nailed down exactly what we want to call it. But from my understanding, as the department has submitted the letters out to the local municipalities, and as soon as we work up a contract, we're actually looking to maybe start those two because we don't have really good ideas. We don't have planning documents in place. Is what we'd like to do is to maybe put 100% state funds up on these projects on the early end, start at the planning document, get a good idea, and then work in the local municipality to make sure this is what they envision. And then once we agree to that, we get into the TIP and move forward. I will also share, it's not really been communicated yet through TDOT. We're going through several changes, and one thing I like to hope that comes forward here is our commitment to finishing projects. So these GFT projects that we're starting, I know I've been with the state 25 years, it seems weird me to say that, but we have projects that have actually been around as long as me. So what I'm seeing right now, and the direction I think the department's going with, which I know where we can go with, is when we commit to these projects, we're looking to actually finish these projects. So we're looking at that 5 to 6 year window. You know, we're always pinning on right away, issues we run into, environmental impacts, but we're trying to commit to actually finishing projects when we start it. So when we see new projects right now that we're putting in here, especially the new highway program that just came out and everybody's seen their projects in there, those are the projects we're going to try to start committing to. So there's a new direction. And y'all should be hearing that coming out from the department, not by Brian, really, really soon.
We had a comment from FHWA.
I just want to make sure that we're clear. We have no restrictions on the so I want to, if we have a miscommunication, no one ever gives me a mic. I don't have an inside voice, but thank you. So yeah, we just want to make sure that we're not limiting amendments. If y'all want to do amendments, we'll process amendments, right?
Oh, you're correct. You're not limiting us, but nobody likes the paperwork of just doing amendments. So we try to keep them down.
Okay, but that's different than FHWA doesn't like to do them. So
well, I didn't mean to say it.
Yeah.
That came out on me. I apologize.
Oh.
We work with all the NPOs and FHWA to make sure we do a good job of limiting the number of amendments we do.
And Mr. Chair, just to go back to the question that I think these boards would benefit from getting out of the weeds a little bit and just understanding what we're trying to accomplish with these projects that are a priority of the governor. So, I mean, I know you don't have planning documents for some of these projects that have been funded through the general fund transfers, but, maybe we can engage you all in conversation about, what's the big picture on these projects, because getting it into the TIP isn't necessarily the goal. It's more about understanding what we're trying to do to solve transportation challenges across the region and how these projects are going to help. That makes it easier, to facilitate getting things into the TIP, which is important procedurally, but maybe, Matt, we can work together on bringing forth a presentation of the projects themselves.
He's gonna bring you a mic. Sorry.
I was saying that when we're at the point where we have substance to these, we will definitely bring it to the table as opposed to, just the project names and things like that. So we'll be happy to do that.
Do we have any other questions related to either of the two proposed amendments or the conversation about the other awards? And if not, I will turn it back over to our chair to facilitate adoption of the amendments.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Does anyone here from the public want to comment on this proposed action? Seeing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve this resolution. Mayor Hutto made the motion, had a second from whoever's keeping minutes. Okay. Thank you. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? So moved then. That resolution passes. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He's amending the United Plan and Work Program.
Thank you, Chair. Second action item that we have is an amendment to the current Unified Planning Work Program. We're about halfway through the 2-year work program, adopted it last year, and These amendments primarily consist of some updates to some of the planning activities that are going on across the region, not only carried out by transit agencies, but also a lot of the local governments in the room. So I think the majority of these amendments focus on that left-hand side of the coordinated planning across the region, so that you're aware of the different transportation planning activities that are being carried out by different agencies and levels of government. And so I guess the two things to capture today that I want to relay, the amendments capture some updated language that we want to incorporate the document related to planning emphasis areas. The FHWA released updated planning emphasis areas earlier this year, and we think that they align really well with our current planning work program, and we want to make sure that we've incorporated kind of the language and how we are addressing some of these emphasis areas that pertaining to equity and justice in transportation planning, complete streets, public involvement, planning and environmental linkages, and data and transportation planning. So that's included in the packet, and we'll incorporate into the document. We also wanted to mention some of the new planning activities that are being carried out that we wanted to make sure were documented within the work program. A number of activities being carried out, either underway or will be soon underway by WeGo Public Transit. A number of work on different corridors, and as well as a couple of kind of widespread plans focused on zero-emission vehicles and transitioning the fleet, and the transit asset management plan. We also have Franklin Transit Authority has a number of planning activities that they will be kicking off over the next year. We also have captured those within the document, and there's some additional detail within the packet on each of these, and even those that have links or website presence, we've tried to incorporate those links as well. Then on the next, we have a number of local government activities. Most of these are some of you have probably participated in some of these activities over the past year, or will be kicking off these activities in the coming year. I think a number of these consist of TDOT's recent urban transportation planning grants awards that we wanted to make sure were captured as those move forward, and then a number of other activities that are being carried out by local governments within the area. I did want to mention that through this update, we did ask for additional requests. There were a couple of requests for federal planning dollars on a couple of activities. One from Metro Nashville for a multimodal mobility master plan, and then also from Sumner County on a net corridor planning study for future phases of work within the corridor. And we'll talk about this, I guess what we've identified for this is looking at trying to accommodate these funding requests through a future pilot planning program utilizing SDBG funds. And we'll talk a little bit about that as part of the new TIP discussion. But I think that that would be another way to further advance some of the local planning that there's a desire to carry out throughout the region, and to identify some additional funding sources in order to advance that. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the fact that we held our public review and comment period, and we have it presented to you today for adoption.
Done, Sean? Any questions for Sean?
Sean, you sort of hit the highlights there. Click on our booklet here, as far as the planning emphasis areas. I'm going to abstain on this, and this is wise because the City of Hendersonville has been applying for some federal grants for some time, and we worked our way up for some infrastructure grants. The Biden administration has included some of the items you mentioned here. I understand the situation the staff is in, that that your priorities have got to reflect the priorities of those funding options. But equity and justice just knocked us down the list from the grants that we've been applying for. We were moving up that list, and we've been told by our consultants, don't even apply for this grant anymore because Hendersonville and a good portion of Middle Tennessee is not going to get those grants. I'm going to abstain on this. Thank you.
Sean, you gonna comment to that, or you just making a statement, right? I thought you was asking a question. Okay, I thought you was gonna ask a question. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Anybody else got a question for Sean? Mayor Anderson.
At what point are we going to begin to see whereas Michael or Sean or broadband in our unified planning? We continually hear that broadband is a problem in all of our counties. It's part of our road network, and nothing is addressed in this at all. At what point can we start expecting some conversations either through GNRC, MPOs, TDOT, Federal Highway, that we're going to look at some of these broadband issues that we have across our highways?
Mr. Chair, I'll take that question because I think that's a conversation probably best had at the GNRC Executive Board level. Most of the work that we're doing on broadband interfaces with our partnership with the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation. I think there's a huge transportation component as well, as you've mentioned before, in terms of the corridors that are presented by transportation facilities. But happy to arrange a conversation with the board, with our state partners, to figure out what more we could be doing to embed that utility essentially into the transportation corridor. I think there have been some comments over the last several months as to what's allowed or not allowed, but we can bring to you some clarity around that issue at a GNRC meeting.
And I can appreciate that, but the last two governors, our House, our Senate, infrastructure, to me, is broadband now. Mm-hmm. It's as important as anything we will deal with because we can't get enough money for roads. And now we're falling trapped to this broadband in all of our communities. And unless we start it, bring it up, have the conversation, Michael, it's not going to, it's got to be put out there for everyone to realize. Our rural counties, I don't know how they're existing.
Yeah, and there's active grants available to invest in broadband.
Those grants aren't worth running from here to the baseball stadium. I mean, there's just not enough money, so we've got to get on a different way and treat it as part of our infrastructure. I've learned that over the years.
Yeah. Well, and just to be clear, is part of your line of questioning or thinking about using transportation dollars to implement broadband, or are you just more asking the question about how are we going to solve the broadband challenges that are out there more generally?
Both. Most cities and counties cannot afford the cost of broadband. And the direction, if you look at TASER, what they've recommended, and you look at across our state, and the corridor that's being developed from Nashville to Rutherford County is a good example of how long that's taking. And it's a wonderful project, but we all need those projects to move that traffic, identify that traffic. And then you get on some of the other areas, you know, at least get a superhighway of infrastructure broadband, and then let us build off from that, kind of like the National Highway did back in the late 50s and 60s.
Okay, well, that's helpful. We'll get to work on getting that together. You know, I don't know that staff has the answers to the questions that you might have that, you know, you might not like those answers, but we can facilitate the conversation and figure out how we can be more responsive to the need. And I'd also invite TDOT or Federal Highway to share your perspective on the issue of the transportation dollar as a way to address broadband.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson.
I'm happy to, just from a transportation perspective, one way to do that is to look at the right of way, right? Is to have the right of way. Now, that is a TDOT, utilities, how TDOT wants to look at utilities, but just from a federal standpoint, we're okay with that, right? So we will work with the department, we will work with y'all on those corridors that you want, and how do we get that done? Of course, we always have to look at maintenance and operations and having people in the right of way doing work in case there's a cut or something like that. So we always have to take safety into account for both the traveling public as well as anybody that's out there doing the maintenance work on the broadband installations. But that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be working with state and local to figure out, we have that right of way, we have the corridors, we're happy to sit down with the department, take a look at what might work, because there is funding available for the broadband itself, maybe not right-of-way purchasing, maybe not, but we do have a lot of right-of-way opportunities, and we want to make sure that that there's no federal requirements that are obstructing that, and if there are, we deal with them and we figure out how to get it done.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and I guess what I would like to add to that is and I know it doesn't help right now, but that is some of the items that we're trying to look at when we do our long-range plan update, is to discuss the needs for it. And I think this has been accelerated a lot through the electric vehicle infrastructure discussions too. So we are aware of it. I think, again, I'll have to find out where we stand with other divisions and their pursuit of this as a hot topic, but I know for my division that this is something that we're going to include in our plan.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mayor Anderson, for it's a good conversation. That's good stuff. It started with you. That's how it starts. Yeah. Sean, you got anything you want to add to that? Michael? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing on this proposed resolution for the 2206 amendment. Anyone here like to speak on that? Seeing none, I'll close it and come back to the body. I need a motion. Is there any discussion? Okay. Got a motion by Mayor Moore. Got a second by Mayor Hope. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? So you're going to abstain? Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm clear that amendment does pass, 2206. Okay, we go to our information items. We got the Hytch Rewards presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to Sean. He's going to introduce a couple people.
I'll just do a quick introduction. At our last meeting, we ran over, didn't get a chance to cover this Hytch Rewards presentation, but we do have Mark Cleveland and Robert Hartline from Hytch Rewards. I'll just give a quick, brief background. This project has been in the works for a number of years. If you'll recall, we carved out funding for a regional transit and technology program through our regional transportation plan. The focus of that program was to have a grant round to fund projects or programs that deploy technology for the purposes of promoting and implementing strategies that encourage alternatives to driving alone and other TDM strategies. And so we had that grant round in 2019. Mark has been getting through the process with us, but the Hytch platform, as he'll take you through, provides the opportunity to encourage different travel behaviors by incentivizing either the use of non-single occupancy commutes or avoidance of certain corridors, or encouraging folks to travel during certain times of the day. And I think has a lot of potential to advance a lot of the goals and objectives that we've identified through our regional transportation plan relating to economic opportunity and mitigating congestion throughout the region. And so he's going to walk you through kind of the Hytch Rewards platform, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Sean. First of all, I would just want to thank the staff for their patience as well. This is a great process that you all go through, and I'm learning a lot as I observe it. I can't help but notice just old habits die hard. As I'm sitting at a table like this, I'm assessing everybody's socks, and you're all pretty stylish today. I want to also just take a quick moment to recognize Dan Teeter, who in 2017, over the last number of years at Nissan Connected Vehicle Services as the top leader at Nissan, sponsored $250,000 together with other local business leaders and organizations, put the money together to help us pay people to share rides and do our first pilot. And really develop about a 12 million mile database in Middle Tennessee of shared rides. So thank you, Dan. If you take the mask off, you can smile. And I just wanted to, first of all, begin with our mission is growing employment through community engagement. We want to motivate, measure, and map a safer commute. As Roger said, we want to track that traffic, and we want to know more about who that individual commuter is. And we have a strategy for that that's deployable and technology that's ready to go today. So I'm going to hit briefly, as I learned this computer, I'm going to hit what I consider the foundations of innovation. And just as Sean said, this is a $1.6 million publicly funded STB, Surface Transportation Block Grant funded project. The funds are set aside and allocated. The contract's complete. The TDOT coordination and everything you guys are talking about here has been through this last several years of the process. We're projecting that the funds are available through October or so of 2024. And they could immediately be used for your organizations. You wind up, through the benefit of this program, having access to an integrated transportation demand management platform. Robert and I are relatively well-known entrepreneurs. We have been doing this for 6 years now. We are committed to helping staff and you raise the $400,000 private match for this grant. There's a larger fund sitting there that is the source of this fund. So as we experience success in a data-driven process, data-driven analysis, you can decide in the future if you want to support this type of approach. I want to recognize the City of Brentwood for coming today and thank you for your involvement with our project for the last several years. Also Mayor Moore, the City of Spring Hill. And I want to talk a little bit about the project goals and approach, how we're doing this, and then what you can do specifically to make a difference, because this is your vision. I shouldn't be explaining it to you. I should be trying to help you understand how we're going to execute it. I think overall the strategic goal is that we're going to use cash rewards to incentivize and motivate superior transportation behavior in any and every mode. These are the goals that y'all have laid out and have been consistent. We're going to move from anonymous data to direct relationships with commuters. We're going to communicate with them and interact with them, and GNRC will own the data. You'll be able to leverage that data for regional project analysis, et cetera. And these are the goals that I think really lay out the why. We believe that the fastest way to change anybody's behavior is to pay them. I don't know anybody on your staff that reports to work for free every day, except in their commute. So think about that as we move forward. These are the fundamental laws of human motivation, I think. There are others, but these are the ones that we tend to point to. Our approach is that we create these public-private partnerships. We define what it is that you think is a superior commute behavior by corridor, by mode, by movement. We think this is how we achieve our social and economic prosperity objectives. We deploy those rules and we pay people for their data and we pay people for their participation. That creates evangelists. That gets us data that we can share with the agencies, and that gets us something to inform our partners, and this circle continues. It's an iterative, constant process. Robert?
This is our current challenge. Our staff are experiencing lots of things. Number one, obviously 2 out of 3 are living paycheck to paycheck. Fuel costs is rising. It may be difficult to get on a bus to get to work, and it's really expensive to now own a car. And what we hope to be able to do is working with employers to solve some of their woes. They're having a massive labor shortage. You know, there's about 10% of the population that could get to work, could be working if they could get to work. We want to enable that to happen. The high gas prices are causing all kinds of challenges with turnover, not to mention environmental challenges, and we're in a new transition from this post-pandemic world where attitudes of the workforce has kind of changed a bit, but getting people together is pretty important for all of us to have a great organization to run. And we do these pairing of these 4 interested parties to help the commuters solve this pain point. It's not just about the traffic. It's about actually getting people together to work better together. And with Hytch, we make everyone more aware of how we travel to work. And that awareness changes behavior.
So the theme at Hytch is that we stack rewards. There's going to be a source of rewards from the GNRC funds. There's sources of rewards from the city of Brentwood. There's sources of rewards from Nissan. There's sources of rewards from brands. And the more we're aligned and participating, and the bigger this group of commuters gets, the more they make, and also the better we are at solving these problems. So what is the Hytch Reward platform? You know, you can download it today. You can start hitching today. Not every region or corridor currently has a rule that's in effect, but you actually can plant a tree for every 50 miles that you drive. We've got a lot of environmentalists that are hitching the heck out of it. It's a mobile platform and a data analytics system that helps us certify the origin, the destination, and all the various different elements of mobility. Route, corridor information, as we've discussed, mode, occupancy, duration, and against these variables, we create rewards. Briefly, this is the messaging platform. These are the 3 most frequently viewed screens. So you'll see on the lower left, and there in the presidential debate, a relatively old slide, that's where we have interactive messaging and education opportunities. So we're constantly educating even the single occupancy driver that there's a possibility you can make 5 times more if you share. So we're meeting the commuter where they are, and we're taking them where we want them to be. And these are examples here of where T-Mobile, for example, could be a sponsor, and that hero space up there is valuable real estate that's all fully interactive. This here is a brief orientation to how we look at geography. It's a project that we put together for Los Angeles World Airport. Obviously, everybody around Los Angeles Airport hates the airport, and they're trying to deal with construction projects and impacts on construction and equity communities. This is just an example of a ride starting in an equity identified, a low socioeconomic performing region that we can identify from census data. Rides that originate, shared rides that originate from that spot can be eligible for greater rewards depending on what your objective is from a policy perspective. And here, this is exactly what their objective was. And lastly, a ride that did not originate in one of those geographies but still was inside the impacted zone. So here you have equity example, a impact and community relations example, and a corridor example, all paying the commuter different amounts based on the rules that are triggered. Here's an example of an actual equity project where the city of South Bend identified, and we don't have anybody, perhaps the GNRC has these resources, but we don't have any city or county that I'm aware of that has identified specific individuals in this way, but you can. So you put individuals into the system. There were 600 people in this project. They were not on a public transportation route, and they were given 20 cents a mile to solve their own transportation problems and get to one of 32 locations in the city from 9 different employers. And whoever took that person to work got paid 50 cents a mile. And because it's less than the cost of driving, it's tax-free income for the person who is doing the driving. So all of a sudden you have the community coming together, as Robert pointed out, to solve one another's transportation problems. It's incredibly powerful. This is a separate example. Well, of course, that thanks to Pete Buttigieg being the mayor, and now we know where he is. We came to the attention of the USDOT. They took our 2 years worth of 2018, 2019 fully deployed pre-pandemic data and ran analysis with us and MTSU. So in this analysis of travel choices and scenarios for sharing rides report, it was released in April of 2021, you'll see some of these examples of some of the data that they pulled out of it. On the left hand, we're going to have handouts for you after this. If you're interested in seeing the slides or having the slides, we can share them with you. But on the left-hand side, that's simply us trying to learn and experiment in the Nashville market. What's the most we can pay? What's the least we can pay? How do we figure out how to pay and under what circumstances are people doing something of value? And we pressed the pricing of the reward down and still got adoption. Ultimately, through this process, we found that 2 cents a mile is as low as 2 cents a mile. You can get people to change their behavior. You can get them to participate. It's relatively, if not astonishingly, inexpensive. Now, on the high side, we have a project that was evaluated and research done by the Minetta Transportation Institute in California. We collaborate with Paul Minette, the designer of this research, and what he determined was that they were able to identify that $5.50 per trip would be a congestion clearing. Now, what I want to do is there's a participation and a learning and an analysis and a data value and what we're trying to do at the low end. And then at the high end, if you want to clear congestion, these guys have proved what it takes. It's $5.50 a trip split by 2 people in this fashion, and that was the design of their research. I wanted to just set your understanding from a low end to a high end what we're talking about. Bottom line is, in order to get past our problems, you else can build some more highways and do some more intersections, and we'll look forward to that. In the meantime, we think the least expensive way to address our situation is to engage the community. So to do that, we have this public-private partnership. There are 6 major areas of focus. This is what matters to employers. Y'all are CEO. I'm using y'all too much. You are CEOs of major organizations. You're trying to get people to mentor one another to work. You're trying to do corporate social responsibility messaging. Communicate to your people what matters to your organization and why, and communicate to your community directly what matters and why. You're looking to create carpools. That's a really hard thing to do, by the way. So with cash, we can self-organize and incentivize people to organize their own carpools, but we also have the technology through our approach to try to drive more carpools. And by the way, that information will be available, and if we start putting van pools in place, we don't care. It's just a bigger carpool from our perspective. But our goal is to get 2 people in a car. Fuel reimbursement has become a big deal, particularly when I'm talking to people like DPR Construction and folks up in Gallatin that are importing skilled labor all the way from Murfreesboro. Fuel reimbursement programs are now a major part of what we do. It's activity-based rewards. If you don't participate, there is no cost. If you participate, we are all achieving our objectives, and we're having data that proves it. And then it's all hyper-targeted messaging based on how they're participating. So this is what it looks like in the cab of a car. You're either employed by a sponsor who is participating and sending you some cash. In this example, you've got an employee driver that's making 5 cents a mile. That's right at the high end. And then we have an employee rider. System can tell whether there's 2 employees together or not. Some of our customers prefer to fund employee commutes higher. And then there's non-employee commutes, where our objective is to get 2 people in a car, your employee and a non-employee. These are examples of data-driven targeting that we can do, and our goal is to, of course, pay people for superior behavior.
All right, this is your part of the show. Let us help you. This funding is now available. Get your employees involved. There's probably somebody in your organization that is the head guy or girl or someone that gets stuff done. We need that person to work with so we can help implement Hytch Rewards as an employer. We're going to be loading all of your staff so they can be eligible for these rewards. And then help us with opportunities to educate your organization and coordinating with the Hytch team. It could be webinars, it could be bulletins, it could be lots of different ways for us to educate them. This is a benefit for your staff. And then help us with your local economic development team to integrate us as well into the strategy. This is an added benefit. This is an added feature that companies are eligible for. And then help us with those existing employers that are having challenges with turnover, challenges with getting staff to work. Unlocking a labor pool that exists in your community by allowing us to get them a ride to work. That's what we do. We're also going to be sending out a video to you guys later today that kind of goes in deep with how we work and how to work with us. But we need your cheerleaders. We need someone to work through. And it's going to be a situation where I want to see all of you, when you visit with someone, I want you to ask this question. Did you hitch here today? Did you hitch here today? You know how you get things done in an organization? You say things 7 times. That's what I've learned. Yeah, or 20. You got to keep talking about it. And when you keep asking, we start having awareness of, how do I get to work? Could I ride with someone to work? When we started this whole project, I remember telling my mother-in-law about carpooling. And you know what she said? The first thing I told her about this, she goes, nobody's going to carpool. And then she goes, that's weird, because she was a teacher in Sumner County. She went to a PTO meeting, and she happened to be talking to her teacher next to her. Come to find out, she was a neighbor, lived 2 streets down the road, and they carpooled for 20 years. Now, this woman said that carpools don't work, and she experienced it for 20 years. So let's get that out of our frame of reference about a carpool. Carpool for your organization means people together getting along. When you separate people from the workplace, you take away their relationships. So it's not about just taking cars off the road here, folks. It's really about getting people together and creating more communities through that effort. Let's hitch. We have some, in the back of this, I neglected to say the most important thing is action from you, and we have a handout. If you have a member of your team that's a go-getter, that gets things done, we all have them, folks. I need to see some hands here, because in the back of this packet is a place for you to give me their information so we can work directly with them to get them engaged. This is free money for your people to take a bus to work. This is free money for them to bring someone to work. Even better, you know that person that you'd like to be fixing those potholes that you can't find yet? Well, they could be in a neighborhood where an existing employer can take them to work. And guess what? Your employees get rewarded for bringing that extra person to work. So we have people to put in to work, and the back of this flyer and pamphlet, if you could fill that out, and I'm going to be asking you for that name, and hopefully we can get those engagement here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Robert and Mark. Before we turn it over for questions, I just wanted to add a couple of immediate next steps that we're working on. So GNRC staff is testing out the platform and trying to familiarize ourselves with it and troubleshoot any issues that we may encounter. And if there's interest from other folks and members that are wanting to be kind of our guinea pigs and pilot this out and test it initially before we launch, please let us know. I think one thing that we are also looking to do next is form a rewards task force. This would be entities across state, regional, local governments that are interested in helping us look through our regional transportation plan and identify how we can set rules through this platform to achieve those goals and objectives. And so this, I think, kind of the rewards or rules committee to help us identify what those conditions should look like for those incentives so that we can, get promote the goals that we want to achieve. So with that, I can turn it over for any questions.
Any questions for Sean, Mark, or Robert? You're being recognized later.
Mark, this has been awarded, and I guess this is bringing it through GNRC.
and you've done the pilot already, I assume. Are we pretty close to implementing this? Where are you at on implementation? Is that going to be soon, or how's that work?
I'm unaccustomed to governmental processes, so from my answer would be yes, I could start tomorrow. However, what our partnership is that we're trying to accomplish is we're taking the best practices from our pilot. We're going to deploy those first to begin collecting data. We're going to work with as Sean said, anybody here who wants to begin this process, we can work with you to pilot and test. And the rules are flexible. We can create a rule today and we can sunset it tomorrow if we don't like it. So It's an incredibly flexible process. We're ready to go.
Well, I think you made a valid point, especially the education system. You've got teachers who go to the same facility. That would be perfect. They typically go to work at the same time. They get off the same time. We have highway garages across the county. They many times do the same thing. When you're talking about putting money in people's pockets, especially now with inflation, people get excited about that. So I just encourage all of you to get this thing rolling and see what we can see how it turns out. Because we take, it's always cost effective to take cars off the streets rather than do infrastructure projects. And I know Eddie Hood knows all about that. It's not getting cheaper to pave streets or build new streets. So, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add a few comments. Just want to thank Mark and Robert for being here. Make sure it's not lost on all of you that this is a homegrown technology. These are local guys who've invested in helping this region solve our transportation challenges. So just want to thank you for your commitment and endurance through our part of the process. Also want to say, just make sure it's clear, you can Hytch today. So GNRC is not funding Hytch as a platform. What we're doing is setting aside some of the funding that is sub-allocated to our region from the Federal Highway Administration to create rules that incentivize behaviors and to pay for direct engagement with commuters through surveys that better understand how people are changing their behaviors as a result of the award, or to understand their experiences as they travel across the region. So that's the contribution that the grant is making. And to that end, it'll be really important to assemble the right people together to determine what those parameters are for the public money and to monitor the performance of that investment so that this board at a later date can decide if this is something it wants to continue investing in down the road. So that's, just to be clear, we're not paying for Hytch, we're not launching Hytch. Hytch already exists. You could do it today. We want to use some of our public funding based on the decisions that y'all made a couple of years ago to invest in changing behavior for the better and consistent with the regional plan.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mayor Holt, for those comments. Anyone else like to ask any questions or to make a comment, please? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to item B, our presentation of now the big word here is drafting. The draft of the 23-26 tip. And again, I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I know we've talked about the draft tip throughout 2022. So today we are going to kind of bring it all together. We'll talk about not only the sub-allocated funds and how that funding is going to be programmed across the next 4 years. We'll also talk about some of the statewide pots of funding and how those will be prioritized within our region. And then we'll also touch on the transit priorities as well. That will be part of this tip for the next 4 years. So I'll start before turning it over to some other GNRC staff. And so just in total, we're looking at about $1.1 billion in federal funds over the next 4 years. And that's broken down by about 83% on the highway side towards highway project and about 17% towards transit projects. I would say too that it's important to note that number grows once we account for some of the state and local non-matching funds to nearly $2 billion. And so that's a significant amount of funding over the next 4 years. And, the goal is to get those projects implemented on that schedule so we can see that investment implemented within our region. So starting off, we'll focus on the sub-allocated highway funding to our region. And I guess the main components here, we're not adding any new projects this time around, and so a significant portion of this TIP is existing commitments, carrying over some of the previous commitments that we've made with SDBG funds and TAP funds and Highway Infrastructure Program projects. Also, the recently awarded CRISA projects, as well as some of the ongoing programs that we've carved out funding for, largely the Active Transportation Program and the Regional Transit and Technology Program. So through this process, we also worked with local governments, and with some of these existing projects, they requested additional funding as a result of updates to the project cost. And what we are recommended doing in the draft tip is to address all of those funding requests within this document for projects that have completed their NEPA process. And so there's several projects that are not yet started or currently working through NEPA, and so the threshold that we stopped at was those projects that have gotten through that process and probably have a better sense of the funding needs for their project. We'll address those funding needs, and then as those projects progress, then we can consider those funding requests once they get to that phase of work. And then lastly, we've been talking a lot about the inflationary pressures and how we can go about helping you all to better position your projects for success when you get to construction and the project goes out to bid. And so we've seen a lot of projects that recently went out to bid and the bids came back higher than expected, and the project needs additional money beyond what's currently programmed. And so we been working to try and identify how can we make sure that there is funding available when circumstances like that happen. And so what we've done is set aside some reserve funds for projects as they move forward towards implementation and likely face some of these cost increases given the environment that we're operating within. And so we've set aside a significant portion of the remaining funds to handle those inflationary costs. And we're setting that aside. It's kind of a first come, first served basis, but it's available for right-of-way and construction. And as soon as projects have completed their final design and can demonstrate a need that they need either additional funding for right-of-way or construction. So I guess just starting with kind of going back to how much we have in total to program over the next 4 years, it's about $325 million across these various funding sources. And as we kind of walk through the next slide, you'll see how we kind of chip away at that amount. So we've got the $325 million. Then when you factor in the commitment to existing commitments, a lot of those carryover projects, that's about $190 million of that, about $44 million in additional funding requests, and then we've assigned about $65.5 million for reserve funds for that implementation. And that goes, those reserve funds are not programmed to a project, but they are reserved towards projects. And so you'll see if you go on the TIP project tracker, you'll see reference to urbanized SDBG funds, but then you'll also see a reference to reserve SDBG funds as well. And that's you'll find that information on each project page. And then lastly, we have a carbon reduction program that is fairly new, and we have left this funding. We have not prioritized this funding towards projects, and so that is a set aside that we'll need to work to address in the coming in the coming years as we make decisions on how to move that, assign that funding. And so once you take all of those commitments, we've got about roughly $10 million in available federal funds remaining, which may seem like a lot, but as we are constantly obligating projects through this TIP, the amount that we have available, because that carryover funding amount shifts, this remaining balance also tends to shift as well. And so we think that that is pretty close to assigning the funding over the next 4 years, and gives a little bit of flexibility as, over the coming months as we finalize this TIP to address any other issues that we encounter. To go to the next slide, just a little bit more on the reserve funds. So the reserve funds you'll see as indicated for either the urbanized SDBG funds or the Murfreesboro SDBG funds, and so those are marked with a RSV, whether it's U for Nashville or M for Murfreesboro UVA. And then, as I mentioned before, can be accessed for right-of-way or construction once projects have the final design and demonstrate their need. And I think one thing that we like about this approach is that it is on a first-come, first-served basis. And so through the Project Delivery Task Force, we have talked a lot about making sure that when projects are ready to move forward with construction, that they're not being held up due to funding. And so I think that this sets them up for success, that those projects that are moving through the process then have a better opportunity to secure the funding that they need in order to finish the project. And just a little bit about some of the funding assumptions that we made for the reserve amounts. We used pretty high inflationary factor, but that is pretty consistent with what we've seen. We've seen a lot of projects that are coming in at 25% higher, 40% higher, and so for projects that expect to move forward with construction in 2023, we assumed a 25% growth factor on top of what was programmed towards that project. For projects in 2024, we increased that to 35%, and then for projects in the out years, 25 and 26, we added 45%. So that will kind of give you some understanding about how those calculations were made as you look through the project pages on our TIP tracker. Next slide. So that's all on the sub-allocated funds. I'm happy to take questions on that before we move into the statewide pot, but if there is none, I can turn it over to Anna to keep going.
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right time, but there's a lot of money comes through this board each year. And a lot of you county mayors, y'all have road superintendents, and I know they all hurt for money right now, but what can the highway departments do to tap into some of this TDOT funding, or what kind of programs are out there for us to utilize? I don't know if it's be for staff, Michael, or Matt, who needs this question here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the directions that we could go. I know we talked a little bit about this on the phone yesterday. You'll see a lot of the needs that come out of our regional analysis of safety and congestion, equity concerns, where the state routes, the pikes, really show up as having a lot of the where a lot of the crashes occur, where a lot of the congestion is, interstates as well. And so I think a lot of the funding that comes down to the region gets prioritized for these areas where the data is informing us where there's the highest needs. But there are a lot of increasing needs, I think, outside of just the cities and some of those major networks that we've seen as we've traveled into some of the unincorporated area where there's a significant amount of growth occurring there, and the road networks in those areas are not, keeping up with the amount of development, whether it be schools or residential units. I think, a lot of those two-lane county roads are now having to burden a lot of that, or, feel the burden of carrying a lot of those traffic volumes. And so I think it's I don't have we'd obviously like to have additional funding to address all of the needs, but I think that one thing that we are going to be kicking off is our regional growth management study, which I think will dig into some of these issues of how to set up some of these areas for success of the growth that's coming in and the transportation infrastructure that may be necessary to support that. How do we make sure that those are aligned and sufficiently aligned? I think that there is some opportunities at the federal level with some of these discretionary grants, but I think as Mayor Cleary kind of touched on this, where they might be looking to specific criteria, whether it's equity or safety or congestion, and they might be looking towards the data as well to inform their priorities. And so certain projects might be higher on the list that are within cities or on the higher networks like the interstates or state routes.
Well, and Sean, Mr. Chair, if I might add, because Mr. Hood, I'm familiar with specifically what you're trying to get funded to Williamson County with respect to that bridge. You've got other needs as well, but I think as we segue into the next section of the new TIP updates, where we're looking at statewide pots, one of our outstanding questions that this board raised a couple of months ago with regards to TDOT funding is that they have programmatic pools of fund. They have bridge programs, for example, and I think one of the questions that we've raised, and I know Matt knows this question is coming, but is what is the state's approach to prioritizing bridge funds so that you understand how to position your projects competitively for that? And that's very specifically, I think, information that we would like to engage TDOT on. And Matt, I know we talked before the meeting today. Maybe just turn it over to you for any insight that you have as to specifically the statewide bridge programs and how this board can engage in those opportunities.
Yeah, you tell me about that. My source today. I knew it was talk project. I wasn't the man for that. Go ahead. Great questions, and the department's always here to try to help as much as possible with any projects. We had a meeting, the department and Sean. We met Monday. There was a young lady, Lisa Dunn, from the local programs office. She helps run state aid office, works with bridges, off-system bridges, and she laid out, and she's going to present to, I think, the county road superintendents Friday, and did talk to Sean about maybe getting her on the agenda to speak in front of y'all, one of y'all's next meetings. But the department has a lot of avenues to try to assist with these all-system bridges, and I know not every one of them fit in a category, and general speaking, they're basically come through grants. We look at different funding sources. I know with the new IIJA, there is a new category of bridges. The department is still investigating and trying to look into it. That would also be a possible source of revenue there, or to assist with a project. But that's about all I got right now, is letting you know that we do have somebody that is an expert in that field. Already engaged Sean from GNRC to try to assist with that.
Mr. Chair, I may ask Sean, because I know you were in that meeting, and this is something that Mayor Anderson has brought up multiple times in terms of how county highway departments can tap into the bridge programs. What do we learn from that meeting in terms of the TDOT approach?
I think so there's kind of two different pathways currently. One is the state aid, where we use much of the state funds, and then there's another opportunity, another pathway to try and leverage federal funds on bridges. I think that one thing, there's the grant programs that TDOT actively, solicits for grant applications like CMAQ, multimodal access grants. I think bridge is a little bit different, where it's more of a, just make your request more on a rolling basis. And I think, there might be an opportunity for, a better compilation of like what are those universe of requests if it's more on a cycle. I think the bridge, Lisa sends out kind of the priority list of bridges that need attention in July. So that might be,
list, yeah.
yeah, so that might be an opportunity where, then if there's a deadline, we can collect all of the bridge funding requests, in September or whatever that deadline might be, so that TDOT has a solid understanding of these are all of the requests or needs across the different counties. And I think there's certain bridges that the one that you mentioned in particular is a pretty high dollar value that might exceed some of the current funding availability through these existing programs. And so how can we work with TDOT to maybe leverage those existing programs, but then also tap into some of the additional funding through the IIJA? But I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I know Lisa is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this. It'd be great to have some of this documentation on TDOT's website too, so that we can point folks to the right place.
So you said this needs to be done by September next month, what you just said? About the place was to try to get on TDOT's bridge issues or what?
Well, I think their process right now is rolling, okay. And so there's no deadline.
Okay.
And so it's really just plugging in, and I think the one benefit is if they're looking at all of the submissions at one point at one time throughout the year, then there's a better comparison rather than just one at a time.
And I would say, meanwhile, until we can get her to speak in front of the board here, is you can reach out to her. It's simple. It's Lisa, LISA.dunn@tn.gov. But Sean made a great point in our meeting Monday, is we do, as a department, need to get that information where everybody can go out there and see it. So I think she's interested in doing that, and she's going to try to get a little quick to do and how to do on her site.
Well, I'll see it Tuesday anyway.
That's right.
Yeah. And she does a great job, man. I have to.
She's taken that over and done a really good job.
Yes, she does. Thank you.
Members of the board, just wanted to let you know, for all the formula bill funding, which is what gets allocated to all the states, that has already been allocated for this fiscal year. Some of it came out just recently, the Protect money and the carbon money. We just call it carbon money because there was a lot of different programs. So those were the last programs to come out with all their eligibilities and guidance. It took us most of the year to get it done. But all the formula money out of bill has been distributed to TDOT and to all the states. The only thing that's left to distribute would be discretionary grants that are done, through application, and so that, we'll do those on an annual basis as well. But the formula money will come out, has already come out for 22, and it will come out in October 1st for 23. So TDOT isn't waiting on any of that funding. So the bridge money has been distributed. All the other, I'll say NHPP, STBG, the money that we're used to getting, what we call legacy programs, all that's been distributed for this fiscal year, and we're prepared to distribute it all October 1st of the upcoming year.
Mr. Chair, appreciate that update, Pam. And I think, Matt, just maybe the request would be to maybe share with our board what bridges are going to be funded from that money, how much money is left, how do you get to the hopper next time around, would be, simply put what we're
okay.
What we're
Yeah, I'll put that down. I'm sorry I have to travel to Knoxville, but
yeah.
Can I give my report real quick? Is that okay?
Well, let me see where you're at. Take care of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll knock it out.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about
that. Mayor Moore. I've done lost my place. Mayor Moore.
I'm so confused now. But I did notice some things on Sean's slides there, and it said first come, first served. So I want my name on the top of the list.
I'm going to be on the front of the line, but I noticed a couple of things I had a question about. Existing programming, and one of the things you listed there was transit and technology, and just I'd like at some point in time to understand better what that technology component is that's been funded. And lastly, the carbon reduction 15+ million, you said that's unprogrammed. I'd like to tack on a little bit what Mayor Anderson said as far as technology. Maybe we can focus a lot of that money on some of the technology things that are out there to help us move along. So that's my comment.
Yeah, and I'll just provide a little bit of background on the Regional Transit and Technology Program. So that is a program that we carved out through the Regional Transportation Plan for subsequent grant cycles. And so that's what Hytch was awarded for back in 2019. And the idea being that we would set that money aside and have a future call for projects where, similar to like TDOT's CMAQ application process, where you could, if you have a project for City of Franklin, you can submit and be funded through that program. And so we've set aside money for the active transportation program in a similar manner. And it's a pretty sizable amount where we, in the past, have been able to fund multiple projects. But I think, you know, along the lines of what you were talking about, those programs were carved out with a huge push towards technology, knowing that, you know, that's one deficiency that we need to work on, and you know, modernizing the transportation system and leveraging those emerging technologies. And I think the carbon reduction program is another one where it's so that $16 million is spaced out over the 4 fiscal years, and then it's also broken out between Murfreesboro UZA and the Nashville UZA, and it's, I think, about you know, $2 to $3 million a year, and so it's maybe not enough to do a call for projects, but maybe there's an opportunity to think through, and we're interested in input that you might have of how that could be leveraged with other pots of funding, and in order to you know, ensure that we can get that money programmed as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody got any questions for Sean? Thank you, Mayor Moore. Anyone else? I'd like to thank Sean and Nan and the board for the work on this. Okay, we're going to move on to our federal. You haven't talked yet?
I have more things to say.
Okay.
I'm sorry, everybody.
I'm so confused. Seems like we've been jumping around here a little bit. Go ahead, Anna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to get through this fairly quickly. I know we're probably risking running over on time here. We've kind of already dipped into this a little, but just switching from our conversation about suballocated funds, over which GNRC has direct discretion, to the statewide pot of funds and TDOT's investments in the state program, which of course involves projects in your own communities. So I know you'll be interested in the details of TDOT's plans for programming in the new TIP. Last time we were all together in June, we had presented a list of projects to you that appeared in the current TIP but were not slated to appear with program funding in the new TIP. I know that caused some concern among members, that those projects had kind of appeared to drop out of the spectrum of projects. So we did approach TDOT with those concerns, and they are going to actually put that list of projects back into the TIP with programs slated for mostly early project phases in fiscal year 2026, which is the last year of the TIP that funds will be programmed in. We were hoping that would kind of help quell anybody's fears about where those projects may have gone. That fiscal year 2026 funding from the state's perspective is a bit illustrative. I think most of you are probably familiar with the fact that TDOT's project programming is mostly governed by their 3-year work program, which is approved by the state legislature every year. So but we did want to let everybody know that there is commitment to this list of projects moving forward. This is just a slide depicting the region's anticipated share of statewide funding, which is what is shown in orange. It's about $275 million to $300 million each of the 4 fiscal years that will be in the TIP, and then that's compared to the amounts shown in the dark blue, which is the actual amounts being programmed in each of those fiscal years by the state. And then this is just a depiction of the summary of specific discrete projects that are being programmed in the TIP. So these are projects that are outside the groupings that the state programs funding into. These are specific projects, and then that's broken down by project phase. As you'll see, there's a large amount of projects that will have construction funding programmed in the upcoming TIP, as well as several that are going to be getting started with preliminary engineering or continuing with right-of-way. We did want to note that approximately $1.1 billion is going to be needed beyond this TIP to complete this list of specific discrete projects. And then this is just a comparison of the amount of funding that's being programmed into TDOT's groupings versus the amount of funding that's being programmed to those specific projects. And then this that I've been alluding to, the National Highway Performance Program allocates funding for pavement and bridge condition on interstates. The Surface Transportation Block Grant Program allocates funding also for pavement and bridge condition. This is mostly geared towards state route projects. The Highway Safety Improvement Program allocates funding to improve safety at high crash locations. And then we've really already been discussing how we are in current conversations with TDOT about how we can better understand and access avenues to voice needs for these groupings and how we can communicate that to the state and more actively engage our membership with the ability to put their projects out there for consideration in those groupings. And I'm happy to take any questions about the statewide pot of funding if anybody has any.
Any questions for Anna? Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Good job, good job.
The last one that we'll cover really quick is transit priorities. I know we've presented on these in the past, and Daniel will just give a quick recap of where we stand with the transit programming as well.
So this is just a comparison of transit revenue versus what will be programmed in the TIP for all of our transit agencies from funds from the Federal Transit Administration. So on the far left, you'll see carryover funding, which is a little bit more than $100 million, and then each fiscal year of the TIP in the orange is the available funding that through the FTA grants, and then in the blue are the programmed amounts for fiscal years 23 through 26.
And then lastly, I just want to talk through kind of the remaining steps of the schedule. So we'll be finishing off the draft TIP and submitting that to TDOT for state review and then subsequent federal review. We will come back and probably have an update next month's meeting, but I'm looking for, to start the public review and comment period in October so that we'd be ready with a public hearing and adoption by our November meeting. That's all we have on that informational item.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, Robert. Anna and Sean. Okay, we'll move to our federal certification review. I'll turn it over to Sean Satala for his review. That's you? Okay, Pam.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm here to provide the results of the federal certification review. I believe you have the report there in your package. So this is just going to be a quick overview of our results. And this is a certification review of the Nashville NPO, which is not the same as the GNRC, covers a different area, has different members. So this is a Nashville NPO certification review, right? So as you are aware, 4 years ago we were making the same presentation because we are required by federal regulations to do a review of the planning process of all our large urban areas around the country, of TMAs, and the TMA is a transportation management area that is a population of greater than 200,000. So what we do is we review the process. We used to do them soup to nuts, but in an effort to try to focus our reviews, we do a risk-based review based on where we're going, and that helps the MPO staff and member entities as well as ourselves focus on those program areas where we would like to, where we think we need to do a little bit of a deeper dive. And just in a nutshell, we're doing good, right? The Nashville NPO is doing good, and we have a couple of recommendations for improvement and then one commendation that I'd like to bring to the board's attention. We started this process 6 months ago, and for those of you that participated in the 2 public meetings that we had with y'all, we very much appreciate your input, right? So I wanted to start with the commendation. We all sort of dropped and ran when the COVID pandemic hit. And so we had to figure out how to make sure that we were continuing to talk with our public, make sure that we were doing that outreach and having our conversations amongst ourselves as well as with others. And so I give a commendation, we want to give a commendation to the Nashville NPO for how they grew their stakeholder engagement actually and how they use some of these technologies, public meetings, online, doing some of their work on websites, et cetera, social media, in order to ensure that we kept engagement with the public, engagement with each other, and then investing in the data visualization and sharing tools so that we could keep doing that, even now that we're all back together. Right? So we do have 2 recommendations that we'd like to share. And again, they are recommendations. They are not requirements for action, but we do think that this will bring some improvements to the Nashville NPO program, right? The planning priorities that we talked about earlier on equity and environment, we discussed the efforts that are ongoing, and we would like to recommend that how those opportunities can be furthered. So I think there's a very good start there, and we'd like to see the good work that has happened continue, and looking at investments and measuring the impacts on equity and environment, right? Secondly, the Nashville NPO, TDOT, Public Transportation Operators, implementing a formal annual joint review of planning agreements. That's one of the things that we saw, and it's easy to let some of the foundational agreements sort of get out of sync. Maybe we move things a little bit forward, we forget to go back and update those on a regular basis, and we kind of maybe do them when we have one of these certification reviews. And what we'd like to recommend is that there is a regular schedule, whether that's annual, biannual. We're recommending annual, but if we want to do a biannual, we can do that as well, to ensure consistency, that as groups are moving forward, as the MPO moves forward, as RTA moves forward, that we're maintaining a consistency in roles and responsibilities within each agency, and we're focused and we're working in the same direction. All right. So with that, and you have the letter, it's unsigned. It looks, and Sean, do you have a copy of the signed one? Maybe just in time for getting into the packet, but I think the letter that I saw, at least in my packet, was unsigned. So if it's not signed, it's not signed. But we do have a signed version, so we want to make sure that do you have a copy of that?
I'll double check.
Okay.
I think.
Well, make sure that you have a signed, because it's signed. I signed it. But I just wanted to let you know that with that signed letter, we have certified the Nashville NPO process that meets federal laws and regulations, and it is certified for the next 4 years, and we will remain in effect until August 3rd of 2026. All right. All right, so if y'all want to move forward, y'all, I said y'all, if y'all want to move forward with any training or assistance with the recommendations, or if there's any other areas that, we'd like to see, that we can help you with improvements or bringing in other folks, please let us know. We will start this process again in 2026. Once again, allowing the board to provide feedback at that point, and it'll be a very similar process, risk-based again. And so again, we very much appreciate your participation and your work with us to get this done, and congratulations, you're certified for another 4 years. All right. Any questions? Yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
But I do have a comment. I just want to thank staff for all you did to get us through this process. I know that it is a long process, and I also want to thank FHWA for your help in the process as well. But we know you guys work long and hard on this, and as a board, we really appreciate it. So thank you.
I know, I do have the signed copy, so we're good. Thanks.
Okay, it's time for the federal report. You ready up again, Pam? You done give it all?
So I'm here at the National Together Certified. No, actually, I guess I could have stayed there, Mr. Chair. I'll just reiterate what I mentioned before. All guidance on new build programs have been released. The last two were the Carbon Reduction Program and Protect, which is a resiliency program. Those are formula programs. We are deep in getting the bill discretionary programs out. All 50 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico submitted their electric vehicle plan, charging station plan. So thank you to Tennessee and TDOT for putting that together. Some of y'all may be working with them on that, so we're processing those plans, looking at them, and funding will be issued probably sometime around January timeframe, because all 50 reports came in on the same day, and they all have to be reviewed and funding issued. So we're actively working with TDOT, actively working with y'all as you receive grants, as you receive discretionary awards. Please let us know how we can help you implement those. Thank you.
Any questions for Pam on that? Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're still going to get the TDOT reports since Matt left. Okay, John, come ahead. All right.
Hey, thank you again. So Matt left me with some notes here when he was walking out the door about the electric vehicles. Anything else he's supposed to report on, I don't have it. But he said that it was submitted on July 27th. FHWA review is scheduled to be complete on September the 30th. And he said, let y'all know that if y'all are interested in a presentation, he is more than willing to come up here and present to y'all.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions or comments?
I just make a comment because I heard the presentation Matt made. And on the electric charging stations, it'd be worthwhile for us to see that.
Yeah, okay.
I'll send that back to him, let him know to have that presentation ready for y'all.
And I don't think we have a copy of the plan that was submitted, do we?
Yeah, I think it's posted on the website now. We'll send that around to members as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for lack of time, I don't know if I'm going to have a chair report, but I'm going to turn something over to Sean.
All right, thank you very much. I know we talk a lot about projects that we plan to do in the future, but we wanted to highlight a couple of recently completed projects in our region. The first one on the left is the Albert Gallatin Avenue in Gallatin that recently opened, and the ribbon cutting was held. We will send this along with the video link, because I think it's some great footage of the new roadway going through Gallatin. And then the other one that we wanted to highlight is the Mount Juliet Road State Route 171 bridge over I-40. That is also has some great video links and photos that we'll send around the link for. And if anybody wanted to talk about those projects, I think it's great to highlight some of the investments that are being made within our region. So we keep an eye on the goalpost. And then the other item I just wanted to mention, I know it's been a while since we had our last project delivery task force, but we are looking to hold a meeting, likely going to be in early September on that, and the topic will most likely be focused on TDOT's integrated project delivery and the work that they've been doing to move towards the new approach to delivering projects, and likely will have some carryover benefits to the work that we've been doing to identify opportunities and solutions to better advance projects through the development process. And then I'll turn it over to Anna for just a quick update on some of the lapsing funds.
Thanks, Sean. I just wanted to share some good news and some relieving news with all of you. A while back, we had brought to you that we had some suballocated funding that was at the discretion of GNRC for the Highway Infrastructure Program and the Transportation Alternatives Program. We had some funding that had not yet been obligated to specific projects that was at risk of lapsing by the end of this federal fiscal year. We were able to identify 2 projects that could use the Highway Infrastructure Program funding, one in Williamson County, the Hillsborough Road and Old Hillsborough Road realignment and signalization project, as well as Metro Nashville's I-24 East interchange and modification at Hickory Hollow Parkway. I'm glad to report that those funds have either already been obligated by FHWA or have an outstanding obligation request, so we are not going to lose the $3.7 million that we were in jeopardy of losing at the end of this fiscal year. I'm also glad to report that it actually turned out that we were not in the position to have any potentially lapsing Transportation Alternatives Program funds. We were able to get all necessary funding obligated by the end of this fiscal year. But we are going to go ahead and commit an amount of money to Hendersonville, Sanders Ferry, Drakes Creek Bike Trail project, as well as Mount Juliet, Cedar Creek Greenway Phase 1 project, just in order to help set us up for success next fiscal year, so we're not in a position where we need to worry. But just wanted to update you guys on that situation. Thank you.
Lastly, I'll turn it over to Michael, a couple of updates.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. And very brief, we have Mid-Cumberland Human Resource Agency coming up here in a bit. But I wanted just to make sure everybody's aware of the September 28th full council meeting. The annual meeting and luncheon is coming up next month. We're going to be doing that at Geodis Park. You'll see the save the date and the agenda here soon. But that will be where we adopt our annual work program and budget, which incorporates the planning dollars for the NPO program that supports this Transportation Policy Board. We'll also elect officers for the region and certify the executive board that would meet regularly here in this room. Also, I want to introduce a very important person to us on staff. It's Michael Mills sitting in the room with us. He's our new Director of Economic and Community Development. He's important to us. He's going to be very important to you. He joins us after serving several years with the Department of Commerce, U.S. Economic Development Administration, most recently in the Atlanta region, and will be on the ground helping you access not only EDA funds, but money from other federal agencies in support of economic and community development, which includes infrastructure investment. He'll also be your interface. He and his staff will be your interface to the State Department of Economic and Community Development, which has got significant investments flowing through development districts across the state to support infrastructure, site development, and economic development efforts that are happening at the local level. With that, Mr. Chair, that will conclude the staff report.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Sean. I guess I'm off. Mayor Reed, could you give us a report from task force? Anything you want to add?
So the entire task force, has not gotten back together recently, but what we have done is we've compiled a smaller group. Andy Barlow from Mount Juliet, myself, GNRC staff. We have gotten together with Preston and some of the department heads at TDOT. We were kind of to the point on the task force, we brought up so many ideas and things we thought that could help us move projects along in the process that it was now time to have discussion with TDOT as to, can this really happen? And so that's where we are now. We've now had 2 meetings, and I will tell you they've been very productive meetings. We just had one on Monday.
It's been a long week.
It has been a long week, so Monday, and I'm really hopeful. We also got to meet with Commissioner Ely with the Mayor's Caucus, and there's some great things that are being talked about coming out of TDOT, I think, that are really going to help this board and help our individual communities. So our task force will be getting back together as a whole, and hopefully Reed will be able to come talk to us, but I feel like we're making some progress.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. Anybody got a question for Mayor Reed? I think this task force is very important. Yeah, thank you. Any other business come before the board? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn to the next meeting on 9/21. Need a motion? I heard a motion somewhere. Second. All in favor say aye. We are adjourned then.
I never saw it. That's okay. No, I used to work in That's okay. Anyway.